My husband looked me in the eye across the kitchen table one Tuesday evening and said, "You know what your problem is, Sandra? You spend money like it grows in the backyard, like it's not my income keeping this house standing." I didn't say anything. I just set down my tea and looked at him. We'd been married for 22 years by then, 22 years of me working full-time as a bookkeeper at a dental practice in Mississauga, 22 years of splitting the mortgage, the groceries, the car insurance, the property tax, the hydro bill, everything down the middle. Sometimes more than the middle on my side when his contracting work slowed down in winter. And still, when the words came out of his mouth, they landed like he believed every syllable. "Your income," I repeated quietly. "You know what I mean," he said, already turning back to the television. I did know what he meant. That was the problem. It hadn't always been this way. When we were first married, we were a team. We bought our semi-detached in Mississauga together, painted every room ourselves, argued pleasantly about whether the living room should be sage green or warm grey. We laughed a lot. We made decisions together. But somewhere around year 8 or 9, something shifted. My husband started his own contracting business and it went well for a while, and I noticed, slowly, the way you notice a draft before you realise a window is broken, that he had started thinking of the household finances as something he managed and I contributed to. Not the other way around. Not equally. He managed. I contributed. I started keeping track, not obsessively, just in a small notebook, not to win an argument, just so I would know what was real. In the last 12 months, I had paid $1,840 more toward the mortgage than him because he had a slow quarter and I covered without being asked. I had done 4 of the last 5 major grocery shops. I had paid both our car insurance renewals in January because he forgot, and the deadline was that Friday. I had bought the new water heater in March, $1,200, no discussion, just necessary, and he had thanked me the way you thank someone for holding a door. And yet, here we were. My money, his income. The moment I want to tell you about happened in October, right before Thanksgiving, Canadian Thanksgiving, the second Monday in October, which in our family meant his family, his mother, his brother and sister-in-law, his 2 nieces, his aunt who drove up from Hamilton every year and complained about the 403 the entire meal. Every year I cooked. Every year I cleaned. Every year I organised the table, bought the flowers from the farm stand on Britannia Road, made the turkey and the stuffing and the mashed potatoes and the cranberry sauce from scratch because his mother had once, years ago, said the canned kind tasted like medicine. That year, the week before Thanksgiving, my husband and I had an argument about the furnace filter. It sounds ridiculous. It was ridiculous, but it wasn't really about the furnace filter. He had said in the middle of it, "I don't know why everything in this house becomes my responsibility to deal with." I laughed, not sarcastically. Genuinely I laughed because I didn't know what else to do with that sentence. "What?" he said. "Nothing," I said. Nothing. But that was the moment. That was when I decided. A few days later, he mentioned that his cousin from Brampton had called and asked if he could bring his new girlfriend to Thanksgiving this year. I told him sure, my husband said from the couch, not looking up. Hope that's okay. 2 more people. Of course it was fine. Of course. And my mother asked if we could do dinner at 1 instead of 3 this year because Aunt Lorraine's hip is bothering her and she wants to get home before dark. 1 o'clock. That meant I would need to start the turkey by 7 in the morning. Sure, I said. I smiled and I went upstairs and I opened my laptop and I started planning. Not the dinner. The dinner was already planned. I want to be clear about something. I am not a vindictive person. I have never been someone who plays games or sets traps or engineers moments of humiliation. In 63 years on this earth, I have never once done anything deliberately to embarrass someone I love. What I did that Thanksgiving was not about humiliation. It was about clarity. I needed him to see something he had stopped being able to see, and I needed to see it too, clearly, without the fog of 22 years of accommodation softening the edges. I went to the Dollarama on Hurontario and bought a package of recipe cards, the old-fashioned kind, lined on one side, blank on the other. And I spent 2 evenings writing things down. Not a grocery list, not a menu, a bill. Not for him, not to hand to anyone. Just for me at first, just to see the number. Turkey, 18, LB from the butcher on Dundas, $87. Stuffing ingredients, $34. Potatoes, turnip, Brussels sprouts, carrots, $61. Cranberry sauce ingredients, $12. Gravy supplies, $8. Pumpkin pie, 2 of them from scratch, $27. Apple crisp, $18. Whipping cream, good quality, $6. Flowers for the table, $35 from the farm stand. The good tablecloth I bought last year that he said was unnecessary, $89 amortized over the years it would last, so maybe $15 this year. My time, I didn't put a number on that. I couldn't. Total food and supplies, $368. I looked at that number for a long time. Then I wrote beside it, his contribution this year, $0 discussed, $0 offered, $0 asked. And below that, I wrote something else. I wrote down what I had been thinking about for years but had never let myself write: the mortgage differential, the January insurance, the water heater, the slow quarters I had quietly absorbed, the groceries, the 100 small things. I wrote them all down on those recipe cards in my neat bookkeeper's handwriting, the same handwriting I had been using for 25 years to make sure other people's numbers were accurate. When I was finished, the total was just over $14,000. In 1 year. I didn't plan to show anyone. I put the cards in my recipe box, between the dividers for soups and salads, and I closed the lid. Thanksgiving morning, I got up at 6:30. I had my coffee standing at the kitchen window, looking at the backyard, the maple tree already half bare, the sky that particular flat white that southern Ontario gets in October, right before the cold really sets in. My husband came downstairs at 8 and said, "Smells good already," and poured himself coffee and sat down and opened his phone. He didn't offer to help. He never had, and I had never asked, and somewhere in there was the whole problem. His family arrived at 12:45. His mother first, because she was always early, carrying a store-bought apple pie and her familiar expression of evaluating everything without saying so. His brother and sister-in-law, their 2 teenage daughters who were lovely girls and already had more self-awareness than the men in this family would ever develop. His aunt from Hamilton, still complaining about the 403. His cousin from Brampton with the new girlfriend, a quiet young woman named, I'll call her the girlfriend because she is not the point of this story, and I liked her actually. She helped me carry dishes without being asked. 13 people. I had made food for 15 because I always do. They settled into the living room and the kitchen, and the cousin showed everyone something on his phone, and I moved between the stove and the counter and the dining room, placing things, adjusting, keeping track of 17 different things at once the way women have been doing since the beginning of time without being asked or noticed or thanked. My husband refilled the chip bowl. That was his contribution to the afternoon. At 1:15, we sat down to dinner. It was, I will say without false modesty, a beautiful table. The turkey was perfect. I have been making turkey since I was 19 years old and learned at my own mother's elbow, and I know what I'm doing. The stuffing was the recipe my grandmother brought from her home in Cape Breton, the one with the summer savoury. The gravy was smooth. The flowers were dahlias and late-season zinnias, orange and rust and deep red, and they looked exactly right against the white tablecloth. My husband sat at the head of the table. He had not carried a single dish. He said, before we started, "Sandra worked really hard today, everyone. Let's give her a hand." Everyone clapped politely. His mother said, "Everything looks lovely, dear." I smiled. And then I went back to the kitchen, and I got the recipe box, and I brought it to the table. "Before we start," I said, I wanted to share something. My voice was completely steady. I want you to know that. There was no drama in how I said it. No shaking, no tears. I was 63 years old and I had been calm in difficult financial conversations my entire professional life, and I treated this one the same way. I've been keeping some notes about how we run this household. I thought it might be a good time to review them as a family. My husband looked up. His expression was not angry yet. It was confused and slightly amused, the way you look when you don't yet realize something is serious. I took out the first recipe card. This dinner today cost $368 in groceries and supplies. I paid for all of it. I set the card on the table in front of my husband. I've been paying for our Thanksgiving dinner for 22 years. I looked it up last night. That's roughly $8,000, accounting for inflation, that I have contributed to your family's Thanksgiving dinners. The table was very quiet. His mother had stopped reaching for the bread. I also, I said, taking out the other cards, paid $14,240 more than my agreed share of our household expenses in the past 12 months alone. I set those cards down too. My handwriting was very clear. Numbers in a column, the way I do them. I'm a bookkeeper. I keep accurate records. My husband said my name in a low voice. I'm not finished, I said pleasantly. I want to be clear that I'm not raising this to embarrass anyone. I'm raising it because I realized last week that I have been treating this marriage like a business arrangement where I absorb overages quietly and my husband treats his contributions as the baseline and mine as optional extras. And I'd been doing that for long enough that I think we've both started to believe it. His brother was looking at the tablecloth. His sister-in-law was looking at me with an expression I recognized. She recognized it too. I could see that. His aunt from Hamilton said, "Well." The girlfriend said nothing, but she reached over and picked up one of the recipe cards and looked at it, and I saw her eyes move down the column of numbers. My husband said, "Can we talk about this later?" "We can absolutely talk about it later," I said. "We will talk about it later. But I wanted to say it here, in front of the people who have sat at this table and eaten the food I cooked and accepted the hospitality I organized for 22 years, because it felt important that they know it was mine. That this," I gestured at the table, "the food, the flowers, the care of it, was mine. My work, my money, my contribution, and I am proud of it. I'm not ashamed of it, but I am no longer willing to have it be invisible." I sat down. I picked up the serving spoon for the mashed potatoes. "Now," I said, "who wants to start?" There was a pause that lasted maybe 5 seconds, which felt like much longer. And then his cousin said, "I'll take some of those potatoes," and that was how Thanksgiving dinner began. The rest of the meal was, externally, almost normal. People talked. The teenagers asked to be excused early and were. His mother ate 2 pieces of turkey and said the stuffing was excellent and did not meet my eyes. His brother made a comment about the hockey season. His aunt said the drive home on the 403 was going to be brutal, but she'd manage. My husband was quiet for most of the meal. Not sulking, not furious, just quiet in the way of someone who has been handed a mirror and is still deciding whether to look into it. After everyone left, we washed up. He dried, which he almost never does. We didn't speak much. Around 9 o'clock, he sat down at the kitchen table where the recipe cards were still stacked in a neat pile, and he looked at them for a long time. Then he said, "I didn't know it was that much." "I know you didn't," I said. "That's why I told you. You should have said something." I sat down across from him. "I've been saying things for 10 years, I said. "I said things. You didn't hear them. So I changed the format." He picked up the card with the annual tally on it. He looked at the number. He set it down. "What do you want to do?" he asked. And it was a real question, not defensive, not already preparing a counter-argument. A real question from a man who had, maybe for the first time in years, stopped performing certainty and was just asking. I had thought about this. I had thought about it very carefully. I want a real partnership, I said, not in theory, in practice. I want us to sit down this month and go through every household expense and divide them explicitly and deliberately, not by default. I want you to make the Thanksgiving booking calls next year and pick up the flowers. I want us to have a joint account for household expenses that we both contribute to equally, and our own accounts for personal spending, and I want to stop absorbing overages in silence, and I want you to stop assuming I will. That's what I want. He was quiet for a while. I can do that, he said. I didn't say great or wonderful or thank you. I just nodded. Because here is the thing I have learned in 63 years, the thing I would tell anyone who asked. Being seen is not a gift someone gives you. It is not something you earn by being patient enough or accommodating enough or good enough at making gravy. It is something you have to insist on. Quietly, if possible. Warmly, if you can manage it. But clearly, and without apology, and with all your numbers in order. We are still married. We had a conversation that November that lasted 3 hours, with a spreadsheet open on the table between us, and it was the most honest conversation we'd had in a decade. Things are different now, not perfect, but different. His mother sent me a card in December. It just said, the stuffing really was excellent. But I'd been doing this long enough to know that sometimes that is how an apology comes, wrapped in something else, smaller than you hoped, but real. I still make Thanksgiving dinner every year. I still get up early and stand at the window with my coffee and watch the maple tree. But now he gets up with me, and he asks what he can do. That, after all of it, is enough. There's something about writing numbers down in your own handwriting that makes the truth impossible to look away from. I had known, in a vague and uncomfortable way, that things were unequal in our marriage. But it wasn't until I sat at the kitchen table with those recipe cards and started writing the turkey, the insurance, the water heater, the quiet winter months I absorbed without a word, that I understood how long I had been making myself smaller to keep the peace. What happened at that Thanksgiving table was not an accident. It was the result of something building for years. And what I've come to understand is that outcomes like that don't arrive randomly. They follow from choices, the choices we make and the ones we don't. For a long time, I chose silence because I believed that patience was the same thing as virtue. I thought absorbing the imbalance without complaint made me a good wife, a steady person, someone who didn't cause trouble. But there's a difference between genuine generosity and the kind of quiet self-erasure that comes from being afraid to be seen clearly. I had confused the two for a very long time. The clarity I found, and it was hard-won, came from something I'd always had at work but had stopped applying at home, the discipline of honest accounting. Not in a cold way, not transactionally, but in the way that any fair relationship requires, which is that both people see the same reality. My husband wasn't a bad man. He had simply been allowed, by my silence, to stop seeing, and I had allowed it because confronting it felt harder than carrying it. What I did that October took something I want to call courage, though when I was doing it I mostly just felt calm. The courage was in the preparation, in deciding, alone over 2 evenings with a cup of tea and a recipe box, that I was worth being accurate about, that the work I did was real, that the numbers told a true story and I had a right to tell it. That is what I would want anyone to take from this, the willingness to look clearly at what is actually happening, to trust your own records, and to say what is true without cruelty but without apology. And then, once you've said it, to stay, to give the other person the chance to hear it. My husband sat at that table for a long time that night. He picked up the card with the number on it. He didn't argue with it. That mattered. A person who can stop, look at evidence and say, I didn't know and I should have, that person is still someone you can build something with. We are different now. The spreadsheet on the kitchen table that November was not romantic, but it was real. And real is what lasting things are made of. I'm 63 years old. I know that the way we treat people and the way we allow ourselves to be treated adds up over time the same way a balance sheet does. Every choice compounds. Every silence compounds. And so does every moment of honesty, every hard conversation held with a steady voice, every time we decide that the truth is worth the discomfort of saying it. The stuffing really was excellent, and I still make it every year.